Welcome to the Digging Deeper podcast here with Forest Hill Church. I'm Stacy Martin. I'm your host, and I am with my friend Lindsey Knuckles. This podcast is a chance for us to dig deep into what we heard this past weekend, to really unpack what we learned in the message, and then ask some questions. What are the things that we're getting hung up on? What are the things we're saying, huh? So this is a chance to meet with other campus pastors, leaders, and staff at Forest Hill to really unpack what this looks like. Lindsey is my guest. Lindsey has spent her career here at Forest Hill pouring into students and families.
Yes, I have.
What's your role here now?
So I work with teenagers, middle school and high school students at our Fort Mill campus.
Awesome. And you have really, I just love the way you intentionally, you don't just like meet with these kids on Sundays. You are doing life with them. I mean, you were a chaplain of a cheerleading squad.
Yeah,
you have just done some cool things with these students.
Thank you. Yeah. What's really cool, one of the things I'm most proud of, so I've led a life group from 6th grade, and now they're seniors. They're graduating from high school. So to see them grow and change and move and see God move in their lives from 6th to 12th grade, that's like 7 years, is crazy. And to feel like you can play a role in that is really awesome.
That's
one of
amazing.
like the best things that God has done in my life.
Oh, well, I have loved being friends with you, being able to see
thanks.
that through
Yeah,
you and
thank you.
see that. And Lindsey
Thank
and I also have another connection because we went to
Yes.
high school together, not the
We
same
did.
years. I'm like an old hag compared to you, but we went to go Myers Park Mustangs.
Myers Park Mustangs. Your sister was a few years younger than me.
That's right, and y'all played softball.
Yes, play softball together.
So Lindsey's athletic.
Yes.
I am not.
Get out of here.
So she's got a lot of
You
got a lot of
played?
gifts. I played
1
for
year?
like Old Providence Rec League, and I
Yeah,
was
you
not good. I was good for team morale. I was really good for team
You are a
morale.
good encourager.
I'm good for team morale, but I am
Yes.
like the staff softball. Nobody recruits me except for cheering,
Oh.
and I'm okay with
sad.
that. I've
Okay,
gotten
that's your role.
That's
You're
my
all right.
role,
You've
and I'm good with that.
accepted it. Okay.
Well, this weekend we looked at Ruth. So we're still in the
Yes.
season where we're looking at Old Testament characters, and we're almost done. We're in Ruth now, and then we're moving to King David. And we had a chance to just dig into this Old Testament story. And it's interesting. It's a short book, 4 chapters.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Scott, who preached at the South Park campus, and I know Andy preached at Fort Mill, some of the other campus pastors preached, but Jonathan started off with this example of being stuck in traffic.
Yep.
And imagine being on 77, you're driving from Fort Mill up to Charlotte
Yes,
all
I
the
think I
time.
drive a lot. Yep.
This is something you can relate to. So you're sitting in traffic, and there is an 18-wheeler in front of you, and you are blocked in on all sides, and you can't see anything. Like your vision is totally obstructed. Why is it, or what do we, I guess, actually let obstruct the vision for what God has for our lives?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think it is that we do?
Yeah, it's a really good comparison. And I think we allow circumstances to cloud our view. And then I think we let fear cloud our view. And I think this is like a really easy place that we find ourselves in because fear doesn't make us feel safe. And fear is like a really real and tangible thing. But fear is a liar. And so I think we find ourselves in that place a lot. And then I think fear tells us, like, what if this traffic jam like lasts forever? And what if I'm here forever and I'm never
Yes.
going to get out of this? And if you think of your life, you're like, I'm in this circumstance forever. And I think it takes faith and it takes trust to believe that God is good and he's going to redeem and he's going to move you forward and you're going to get moving again. And I like this like phrase I always say in my life. And I don't know if I read it somewhere or someone said it to me, but God has not led us this far to abandon us now. And I always think about that, especially when it comes to this, but God has not led us this far to abandon us now. And but it reminds me like the story of the traffic jam. I have a story of being on the road, but it was in high school, and I just come from a softball game, so it's funny that you said that. And it wasn't a traffic jam, but it was a really bad storm, and so it's raining so hard. I'm like probably 16 or 17, and I cannot see anything in front of me, and it's probably like a 15-minute drive, but it's so bad. I'm like sobbing in the car. I cannot see anything. I can't see the car in front of me. And I remember feeling really terrified. I'm calling my mom on the phone. I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to get home. What should I do? Should I pull over? And I remember I finally get home. I like burst through the door. I'm like sobbing. I hug my mom. We like hug for a little bit. And then I remember I was like, okay. And I go into the living room, my brother and sister there, and they're like, hey. I'm like, hey. I remember feeling like really embarrassed that I made such a big deal. And I was like, what are you guys watching on TV? They're like, nothing. And it was like nothing. It was like, I made it.
Yeah.
And I think about that sometimes in my life, and I'm like, I'm in a storm. I can't get out. I cannot see anything in front of me. And then you make it and you're safe. And then you're like, oh, that wasn't, God led me safely so far, you know, and he'll lead me home, you know? And so I think about that because I remember being like super embarrassed. My brother and sister were like, are you okay?
Like, so you were driving
yeah,
in the rain.
And I was like, really like sheepish. I remember being like, hey guys,
But isn't that for all of us, though? It just doesn't matter where we are. I think that's the hard thing, too, is that when when we are in situations, sometimes we are interpreting our whole life through that circumstance. And it takes somebody else saying, it's a storm. And it will end, and you will drive in sunshine again. Let's take the metaphor one more step, and you're like, oh, yes.
Yes. And now every time it rains, I'm like, I remember that. I'm like, it's okay. It's like it's a memory for me. I was driving on the highway the other day, and it started to rain pretty hard. And I'm like, it's fine, And so, anyway, it's a great example.
Yeah, it really is.
I like that sunshine.
Well, one of the things I love to do when I read stories like this is to imagine if it were a Hallmark movie, who I would cast. And the reason this question came up to me, and I almost started laughing in the series, in the weekend message this past weekend, is that one of the characters is Orpah. And every time I see Orpah, I think Oprah. All I can do is think of Oprah. Like, I am straight up envisioning Oprah as Ruth's sister-in-law.
Okay. That's great.
Isn't that crazy?
That's funny.
So if in reading this book, there's three main characters really in the story. Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz.
Yep.
If you were to cast, and I'll give you my votes, if you were to cast these in a Hallmark movie, who would play Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz?
Okay. These three people would probably not be on Hallmark.
That's good because there's very few Hallmark movies that I actually do watch. So, is this a Netflix original?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Yes, maybe. So I would have Ruth would be Jennifer Lawrence. Don't you think that would be awesome?
Oh, I could see that.
Jennifer Lawrence. Naomi, I put Meryl Streep. Because she's amazing.
Yeah.
She's like a mother figure to me even.
Yeah.
And then Boaz.
Meryl Streep's a mother figure to you? I had to go back there. We mad. Good. But you know what? You feel connection.
I'm like, I just feel connected to her. And Boaz, Bradley Cooper. I just want the reunion of Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper.
Okay.
I think that's feels good to me.
That does feel good. Mm-hmm. I know we are not that far apart in age, but when I tell you who I would cast as Boaz, you're gonna glaze over.
Okay.
Sully from Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. I totally see him as Boaz.
I've never seen that show, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, next question.
I know what you're talking about.
Sully from Dr. Quinn. I just see it. I see it. And I see Jane Seymour as Naomi.
Yes.
Ruth.
This is a Lifetime movie that you're describing.
Well, that was kind of my frame of reference. I'll have to think about Ruth a little bit more, but I'm straight up Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman for the other two characters.
Okay. That's really funny.
Well, so if we're setting the time, let's keep talking about the show. The setting of the book of Ruth is in the time of Judges. And we hear that in this time, it's a cycle. Why is this time period a cyclical time?
Yeah. So at the end of the book of Judges, there's a line that says, there was no king at the time in Israel, and everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And so humanity determined what was right and wrong, which was a recipe for disobedience. And so the cycle, it went like this, where Israel disobeyed, and they did not follow God's command in every single way imaginable. And so God rose up a neighboring nation to conquer them. And then the people cried out for help. God, help us, save us. And so God delivered a judge to lead them. And then the people disobeyed and fell back into evil and disobeyed and walked away from God's commands. And then went over and over again. God allowed a conquering nation. And so that was the cycle of history at that time. And so that's where the context of the story of Ruth begins.
So is that why there was the issues between the Moab people and Israelites? Was the Moab country one of those nations that was trying to rise up over Israel, or why was that?
Yeah, so God was cautious about. I think he says, or like one of the questions was, why didn't he want them associating with the Moabites? And it's because they worshipped other gods, and so God wanted the Israelite people to worship Him and Him alone. And so associating with people that worship other gods was dangerous and a temptation, and allowed them to fall back into disobedience.
So that's an interesting kind of play. So Naomi had two sons. Naomi and her sons were from Bethlehem, and they married Moabite women, which was not Oprah, but Orpah and Ruth. Oprah and Jennifer Lawrence. No, so Orpah and Ruth.
Yes.
And there a lot of tragedy happens. Naomi's husband dies. Orpah and Ruth's husbands die. And and then a famine hits Bethlehem. And so they're like, we've got to make a change because we're not going to survive. So they leave. Naomi, with all of this tragedy, she's lost two of her sons and her husband. She says, you know what? God has been so unkind to me. I'm changing my name. You can call me Mara, and that means bitter, because that is who I am.
Yes.
How do you think we change our own identities to reflect our circumstances and what happened. How does that really?
I think this is really easy for us to fall into, and it kind of reminds me of the first question, but where we allow our circumstances to define who we are. And so let's just take it to today, where I am single. I'm going to be single forever. I'm in debt. I'm going to be in debt forever. I have this crisis or conflict in my marriage. I'm going to be in this forever. And so that begins to shape our lens and our view. And then that becomes like who we are. And so even our emotions and our response, like she talks, I am bitter. I mean, she's grieving, and that becomes who she is and who she'll always be. And I will always be this way. I will always be in this traffic jam, and I will always feel this way. But I think the question is, what is the root of our identity that goes beyond our circumstances? And is that we are beloved and we are loved by God and we are worthy and we're created for a purpose. And that's the foundation beyond anything that changes in our lives. And that's it. And I feel like sometimes that falls into like Christianese. We say it all the time, like, who are we? But to the core of your being, who are you? And so I think that's our true identity. But we allow things to change and to shape. And the words people say about us, the mistakes we make, like, I'm a failure. And so I will always be one. It's like, no, that's not who you are. That doesn't define you. So
that's so hard. Well, it even looks like in this story, the things that then started to change that for Naomi, is this idea that these series of coincidences start happening. And you have to, you don't realize, the first time I read through Ruth, I'm not sure I realized how coincidental these things were. So they arrive and it's barley harvest time. So that's an important fact. And I love that was pulled out, because if you're reading it, just like with any sort of I don't know, text, you might just glaze over it. Like, okay, barley harvest, but that's important. And then it's important that Ruth finds herself in the field gleaning, getting the leftover barley, and it's Boaz's field. What is it about coincidences, and should we be paying attention to these in our real life?
Yes. So God is an intentional God, and he cares about us, and he is in the very intimate detail. And so these things are not coincidences. I think they're intentional. And it reminds me of a story. So I just went on a beach retreat with my life group that I mentioned. They're senior girls, and we took like 11 of them to the beach. And I asked them a question to think through, like, where has God been faithful in your life? Where have you seen them? Because I think it's important to remember, because when they're going to a new season in college. And so where can you look back and see where God has been good? And so ask them to name some places in their lives where they've seen God been good. And there's one girl in particular, she's new to our group, and she said the first time she came to life group, she was invited by a friend, and she was in life group, and another girl in the group spoke up and said she just broke up with her boyfriend. And there was something about that story that planted a seed of bravery in that girl's heart. And so God worked in that, and she ended up breaking up with her boyfriend in like 2 years. And so I think about, I was hearing her talk, and I was like, that is an intentional moment where God put you in this life group at this exact moment and had both of you walking through the same thing. It's not an accident or coincidence. It's intentional, and God orchestrated you to be in this group at that time. And so that was really, really neat to kind of name that in their lives. And one girl was like, a friend texted me at a time when I was like sobbing and really feeling depressed. I'm like, that was God. These moments are God reaching out, and he hears you and he cares about you. He's not leaving anybody on the side of the road. And I think we should pay attention to those moments in our lives.
I think that's what I actually like about the Old Testament. For years and years and years, the Old Testament wasn't as sexy and pretty and shiny as the New Testament, if you can say that about the New Testament. Because it just felt so dry or harsh, but it's really a whole history of God reminding his people of all the times he showed up. Like, none of this is a coincidence. These are all the times that we showed up.
And I like to think of like Scripture the same way that you're talking about is like, you can see them as individual stories, or you can see them as this huge meta narrative of how God is faithful and he's kind and he's good and he's working and he's in all of these. He's weaving this narrative of hope and redemption, and it's written all over the Old Testament. I love it too. I love the Old Testament so much for that very reason. It's God on the move and God writing, and takes patience and faith, and that's where you see that in these characters, is their faith and trust in God.
Well, and I just love how it informs other things too. So one of the questions I have, Ruth actually says in her own words, and I think it's in chapter 3, she says, like, I cannot believe you're being this kind to me. She's talking to Boaz. She's like, I cannot believe that you are letting me go to your field. You're being this kind to me because I'm a foreigner. I'm a foreigner. how does this inform us? And I know this is,
Yeah.
I gave you veto rights on this question
did.
because I was like,
You did.
you know, this is right now in politics, it can be so hard to feel like you can talk about, well, does this inform how we should be caring for foreigners, refugees, immigrants?
Yes. Yep.
But there's a Christian probably response to this that's not polarizing.
Right.
It's not
Right.
Republican. It's not
Right.
Democrat. It's not
Right.
liberal. It's just what we're hearing in the script. What would you say about that?
I say this story is ultimately the story about the heart of God, and that God cares for the weak and the vulnerable. He cares for those who are lost. He cares for those who are poor. He cares for those without hope. And that's his very heart. And so where we see the kindness in Boaz, it's the kindness of God demonstrated, that he's a protector, and he is never going to turn his back on the marginalized. And so I think for us as believers is may we imitate the heart of God and how we interact with people, both alike and different from us. And I think that God is less concerned about nationalism and he's more concerned about kindness in his kingdom. And then I think even in our own context, so when Boaz shows kindness to Ruth, he changes her life. And then God changes, the course of history through Boaz's kindness.
Yes.
And so where can we show kindness to people and invest in the lives of people wherever we are, And so whether that's, the immigrants or the foreigners and people in our communities, or if it's fostering or adopting or serving or teaching or volunteering or leading a life group, how can we allow the kindness of God to move through us? So that's what I like. Yeah, it doesn't have to be polarizing. It's like, how can we demonstrate the heart of God, and for the people around us?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I love that because of the heart of God, that what Boaz does for Ruth, and what Ruth then goes back and communicates to Naomi. She says, like, I got to tell you, listen to all these things that's happened. Naomi starts to have a change of heart, this like bitterness, and she.
Well, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
but it's even to like the kindness of Ruth. At the beginning, we're like, Naomi, I'm not leaving you. And we're going into this together. And so then this story is just all about kindness, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. And so you can see kindness written all over it.
Yeah,
I wanted to point out
God.
like the kindness of Ruth, at the very beginning, and then the kindness of God. So it's exciting.
All of that starts to change Naomi's heart towards the whole situation. And Jonathan said something. He said, the goodness of God awakens something deep inside of us. And I totally agree.
I love that. Yep.
And hearing him say that, I could almost visualize like new growth, like a sprouting plant coming out of a hard concrete, something like that.
Yep.
But really knowing the goodness of God and reflecting on that is a practice of gratitude.
Yes.
And that can be hard.
It is very hard.
So we were just talking about the Enneagram before we started, because
I'm a type 1.
You're a type 1 and you love the
Enneagram.
Yes. So how do you, as a type 1, tell us what a type 1 is?
Okay, good.
And
this
then
is my sweet spot.
Yeah, girl. Tell us, and then tell us, how do you personally practice gratitude?
Yep. So the Enneagram is like a personality type test, and it really tests how you are motivated, and so your motivations and how they play out in your life. So I'm a type 1 with a wing too. We don't have to get into the wings, but
it sounds nerdy, but I'm into it.
But you're into it. Okay. But the type 1, we're called reformers, which means on unhealthy times we can lean towards perfectionism. So we want things to be perfect, and that plays out in our spiritual lives, because we want to be perfect in order to be good. So we're trying to earn things. We're trying to earn God's love, and so the lens through which I see the world is I want to see it as it should be. And so I can look into a space, I see the world, I'm like, there's a lot wrong. And so we need to fix this. And that is constantly how I'm viewing things. And so gratitude's a little bit hard for me. And it catches me off guard sometimes, because I tend to look at everything, my life, other people, through the lens of like, we can be better and let's be better. And I think sometimes that's very good and that's very useful and helpful. But I don't always see the good quickly, because it's the way I'm wired. I think God is teaching me a lot through that and learning about myself. And so gratitude, it's really interesting. I don't know how to describe it, but sometimes I can feel gratitude, or I'll feel this like warmth in me, and I'm like, what is that? I'm like, I'm grateful.
Do I have a fever?
Yeah, I'm grateful. I went through a hard season last year, 2 years ago, and I got a few days off to kind of go to the mountains and spend time with friends, and I was like, what is this feeling? I haven't felt it in a while. I'm like, I'm grateful. And it was like gratitude came. And so I'm learning to change my lens. So I have a house and I live in it, and there's a lot of yard work. And so I have to do yard work, but I have a home and God has provided. Yes. There's provision there. And so I have to do dishes. but God has given me, the ability to cook and to make food and to open my home to people. And so there's a way you can change.
So
your
it's an
perspective.
actual practice for you.
Yes.
Since it doesn't come naturally.
It does not come naturally.
It's an active seeking out of where do I find the goodness of God in this?
Because when you make gratitude a habit, you can see patterns of grace in your life and you see where God has been faithful. And so just a couple of things I think to make gratitude a habit is I'm a writer. I like to write things down. That is just the way that I can connect. It helps me get things out of my mind. And so writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day. And as dumb and small as that sounds, it will change your thought life. It will change how you see things. And just writing down 3 things you're grateful for, or tell your spouse 3 things you're grateful for, or tell your life group, or send in a group text. Hey, here are 3 things I'm grateful for.
Wow.
Making it a habit. I think too, there's a connection between social media and technology and phones and gratitude. Because I think a lot of the times we're on our phones and we're comparing. Absolutely. Or we only post things that make us look great when life's messy. So maybe making it a habit of creating boundaries on your phone, charging your phone in another room when you go to sleep at night, so that the last thing you do is prayer, or hey, here's what I was grateful for today, instead of looking at someone else's account and feeling jealous and about something that they have. So. Or setting boundaries on what you post, or I'm going to post something that doesn't look great, doesn't make me grateful on the outside, but on the inside, it's God in the heart. Yeah. So there's just a few things I think we can do to make gratitude a practice. Go outside, look outside. Creation is everywhere.
Yeah. If we can't be thankful for the blue skies, and the pollen and all the things,
or the allergy medication we have
exactly.
to take.
Exactly. It really is taking that shift on perspective. I mean, even being in the traffic jam like we talked about before, if that's the narrow lens through which you're seeing life, surely you're only gonna fear. Because gratitude and fear don't go together.
Right. And I think this could be another trail or another conversation, but I think rubbing shoulders or becoming friends with people who don't live in the same context as you, who don't have the same family, don't have the same, socioeconomic lifestyle as you, is huge, because it allows you to see there are other people that live different lives than I do, and so I think that's been important for me to kind of have conversations with people who see life differently than I do. So that could be a whole nother conversation.
Oh my gosh,
that's been really helpful for me. Yeah. To help me understand, how grateful I am, and how grateful they are, and, how we can both live in the same space. So
and
that could
iron sharpens iron. That's what they say in the Bible. Being with other believers and being with other people, seeing how other people practice out their faith can then inform how you do that.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting in this story of Ruth, Naomi gives Ruth some kind of instructions about what to do with her life.
A little bit weird.
And I'm going to tell you, the first time that I heard these instructions, she basically says, go find Boaz tonight. He's going to drink some wine.
Yep.
And, from that wine and his full day of work, he's going to be tired and a little loose. Go find him and dress up. Don't wear your work clothes.
No,
get some oil. You got to look nice and go to his feet. And I'm thinking, did Naomi just tell Ruth to seduce Boaz?
Yeah. So it sounds like.
It does sound like that.
Yeah.
But is that what happened?
No, that's not what happened. It sounds like it.
Yes.
But it's not. And so Naomi tells Ruth to, look good, like you were describing, to wash herself, to anoint herself, to put on her cloak. And really that was a sign that she's done mourning the loss of her husband. She's done. She's ready to kind of move forward and ready to ask him what she wants to ask him. And so that's what that kind of symbolizes. Okay. And it seems like an incredibly odd thing.
Yeah.
But then she lays at the foot of his bed and uncovers his feet. And so the uncovering of the feet is that I'm dependent on you. And so it's a symbol of that. I'm dependent on you, even in this bold marriage proposal that I'm about to tell you, I'm about to ask you, that this is kind of a symbol of dependence, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, because I really, that stumped me for a little bit at first. I think that seems very bold in Old Testament.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I know Ruth is a Moab, but even in Jewish tradition, that seems very out of character. So that's good to know. And even in that period of mourning, that she was saying, I'm being obedient. Because a lot of the story is about obedience.
Absolutely. 100%.
And I tell you what I love the most about this story is that out of obedience and kindness, God takes the story, and it is through the lineage of Christ.
Yes.
I mean, so Ruth and Boaz end up getting married. They end up having a baby named Obed. Obed then ends up being the father of Jesse. Jesse then to King David, and so on and so forth to Jesus. And that's just
Isn't that amazing?
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
It's amazing to me.
Yes.
And I love, and we talked about it a little bit in last week's podcast about Rahab and how
Yes.
God used Rahab, who was a
Yes.
prostitute,
Yes.
in the lineage of Christ. And I used to just glaze through the genealogy because it just seemed like a long list of names you could hardly pronounce. But then to see the intentionality
It's
of
so
how God,
significant.
I mean, he
Yes.
chose people
Yes, it's
to play that
significant.
role. It's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yep.
Well, Jonathan said in this that what appears to be setbacks for us in a lot of cases are slingshots. And I
Yeah.
love this. I just love the imagery of thinking about pulling back a slingshot and then letting it go and how far that launches. And that what appeared to be a setback for Ruth. So
Yeah.
the death of her husband, this famine, this decision to even stay with her mother-in-law
Yeah.
ended up being a slingshot into the future that ended up being a blessing for
Yeah.
millions. Where have you
awesome.
seen that play out in real life,
Yeah,
either for
it's
you
awesome.
or other people?
Yeah. I think for me, I went through a time of really a lot of restlessness in my calling, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions of like, where am I? Where am I supposed to be? God, did you forget about me? I think that was my core fear in that season, was that God had abandoned me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was abandoned by people. And that's like a really deep fear to feel that. And I knew that it wasn't true, but it felt very real to me. But when I look back, that was one of the richest seasons of my life, because I learned more about myself and my Creator than I had in any other season. And God proved so faithful to me than in any other time of my life. And I like to think, I like the slingshot, but a friend of mine, we always talk about the really hard years. They can feel like they're digging holes in you, and you feel like you're left with wounds and with holes that make you feel weak and flimsy. I mean, you're just covered in holes and
Compromised,
wounds.
yeah.
Yes. But really you learn that they are actually wells, and they're filled with water, and they're nourishing you and giving you sustenance. And, you learn lessons from those years, and God is giving much grace in those years. And so I love that
Oh,
idea,
that's good.
they're not holes, they're actually
They're
wells,
wells.
and they're useful, and they provide nourishment and abundance, really. Anyway,
Wow.
So I love that, but I love the slingshot. That I can see that, but sometimes it's a slow filling, and
Yeah.
because slingshot feels quick.
Oh,
You know
yeah,
what I
it
mean?
does.
It feels like awesome. And
Yeah, it feels like it happens instantaneously. All you got
Yeah.
to do is pull it back, and as soon as
Sometimes,
the tension point's
yeah.
there, you're launched. But I love that idea of wells, that it's not
Yeah.
deep gaping wounds. They're
right.
wells that
They're
are to be filled.
To be filled, yeah. To be filled
Wow.
and to provide sustenance. So
Yeah, well,
I love
Jonathan was
that.
saying that in these circumstances, when we're in these
Yes.
the hole digging circumstances, that we really do have two choices. We can
Yes.
stay stuck,
Yep.
or we can climb out. And if we want to climb out, which there may be a few of us that want to stay stuck, and sometimes I'm not gonna
Who
lie,
wants to stay stuck?
there are some days where
It's
you just want to have
easier.
like a pity party,
It's
right?
easier.
It's just easier.
Yes.
But
Yep.
for the most
Yep.
part, we all want to climb out. And he was saying that there are really 3 steps to climbing out: devotion, diligence, and courageous obedience.
Yeah. Okay.
So devotion, that means that we've got to love God more than anything else, really. And we've got to be devoted to something greater than our
Yeah.
circumstances, and that's God. So by doing that, we have to cry out to God. How does someone actually cry out to God? Like, what does that look like?
What is it?
If I'm either a new Christian, or I'm
Yes.
coming back to church, or I'm just not somebody, and we talked about this. I am good. I'm really good at praying for other people.
Yes.
I'm really good about praying for the things, but I am not good with like going to that heart space
Yeah.
and like giving God
Yeah.
my junk. So
Yeah.
how do you
Yep.
cry out to God?
Yeah. I think crying out to God is honest prayer. And I think prayer begins an honest conversation, and God can handle an honest conversation. And so I think crying out is a surrender, and it's a desperation, it's honesty. I think often we will paint a different picture for God, or we hide. I hide.
I do that
Yeah,
all the
I
time.
isolate. I hide from God. But there's a verse that says like we can approach the throne of grace with confidence and receive mercy and help in time of need. And we can boldly approach the throne of grace because we're children of God. And He doesn't. I love that He doesn't. We don't get condemnation or judgment, but we receive mercy and help and grace in time of need. And so I think that's the crying out, is the honesty. I think too, there's this word that's thrown around is lament, which I think as believers we need to learn to lament. And
There's a whole
lament-
book called Lamentations.
There is
right?
a whole
And-
book, yes. And then the book of Psalms is full of David's laments, the King David, which I know we're coming up talking about. But and so lamenting is this active crying out to God in the midst of pain. And I think lamenting is owning and facing, accepting pain and turning it to beauty. And so read Psalms. It's full of these like, God, I don't understand. I don't understand this. Like I'm grieving, I'm sad, I'm angry, but I trust you. Because I think that can stay in here. And do
Well, and I
some-
think there's something about lamenting and gratitude. There's a connection
Yes.
there. But I think on the surface, it looks like, well, I can't lament because lamenting means that I'm not being grateful.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think maybe that's where I go. I'm like, God, I don't want to give you this junk because I feel like it's disrespectful for all the good things you've done. However, I think what it actually does is help you see the blessings brighter. Like they're easier to
that's
spot.
good.
It's like panning
Yeah.
for gold.
Yeah, that's
You
good.
know, you have to have the other things
Yeah.
in there to see the
Yeah.
sparkle.
Yeah. And then it's what's funny and ironic is like it's in there anyway. Let's just get it out there. You know what I mean? Like God
Yes.
knows, he can hear, he's sovereign, he reads our minds. He's everywhere. And for us
He's
to
not
be like,
too fragile
I'm
for my
okay.
mess.
Right. He can
Yes.
handle an honest conversation. That's what I love about God. And grace takes the pressure away. But and then I think when it comes to crying out to God, it can be a verbal, I'm crying out to God, but also writing your prayers. I mentioned that. That's a big one for me, writing my prayers down. So writing out how I feel and what's hard for me, and looking at it and connecting with it. So crying out doesn't have to be a literal
little
groan.
cry.
It can be.
Yeah.
It very much can be, but it also can be writing.
Yeah.
Other forms, taking a walk and meditating, things like that. So
Well, the second part of that was diligence, and this is I think can be a hard word for people.
Yeah.
Because it requires us doing something about, like, we can't just sit back and wait for our circumstances to change. We actually have to take an active role in what this looks like.
Yeah.
But what's the fine line between
Yeah.
taking control and being an active participant and climbing out and just waiting for the will of the Lord?
Yeah.
Like, Lord, let it be your will and in your
Yeah.
timing. Like, what's
yeah,
that?
Yeah. I'm actually learning this lesson right now. And so I don't know. And I am actually.
And I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah,
I think that,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
being in that place.
Yeah, and I think this is something that God is actually actively teaching me right now. And what is the difference? Because I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to mishear him. And I want to be sure I'm honoring him. So I'm just going to stay here until I'm positively sure, and so
I've got to be 120%
I got to be
sure.
120% sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think it works that way, so I think God is actively working on that right now. But I guess the one thing I would say is just taking active steps, a step of obedience every day, spending time with the Lord every single day. And I think a question I'm currently asking myself is, am I my own compass? Am I determining my direction, or is God? And who is the author of my life? And who is driving the ship? And so I keep kind of coming back to that. And God is faithful to answer, but I think I don't know if I have a ton of ways to answer that question, because it's one I'm currently wrestling through.
Yeah, this morning in my quiet time, I read One Day in Jesus Calling, and then now I'm in Romans. And so I was reading for the April 1st edition. We record this podcast on Monday, and it releases on Wednesday. So this is Monday, April 1st. April Fools. And it was talking about surrendering your daily to-do list to God. And I mean, in an active way, like, I'm not even going to write it today. Lord, number my actions. Like, I give you, and that's hard for me because I love a list. I love to feel like I'm in control, but the thought of giving God my whole day and saying, I will, like, you just number all the actions and tasks that I have to do is crazy to me, but gosh, how freeing to be able to be in that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why I feel like I want to say this, but I think, let's not forget that fear, that courage is not the absence of fear. Whoever said that. But I think if we're waiting to not feel afraid, then we may be waiting a long time, because courage is moving
like
into
forever.
that forever,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I'm always having to remind myself, I'm like, courage. I need to be courageous, because that means not just like, all right, I need to not be afraid anymore. It's like moving into that and leaning into that and trusting that God is there already. I mean, he's gone before us, and he's with us, and he hymns us in as we go. And so, yeah.
Well, being courageously obedient is the next part, and that is hearing the voice of God and then obeying it.
Yep.
So how do we hear the voice of God?
This is going to sound obvious, but through listening. But I think, and I say that funny, but I really mean, I think too often, and I've been in a season where we talk to God. We're just talking.
All the words.
All the words. And I was at that season a couple years ago where I'm like, I'm not hearing God. And I'm like, well, maybe because I'm not
quiet.
I'm not being quiet. I haven't stopped talking. And so I changed my posture of prayer to listening, which is so hard.
Well, what does that look like?
Yeah. So it's stilling your mind, which my mind is extremely active. And I constantly have thoughts running through my head. So it's practicing meditation. It's being still.
So meditation's not just like a new age thing. It's got roots
absolutely.
even.
Yes. We used to do these prayer retreats as a part of the formal team, and the very beginning of the day would be like 30 minutes of silence, like meditation, and it took me like 15 minutes to like get to that place where I wasn't just bombarded with thoughts, but just really listening. And God has, this could be another tangent, but I have this like visual in my head of when I pray, I imagine the throne room of God. And that's like a whole thing that may sound mysticky, but I have this, I can see it, and that's where I am when I pray. And it helps me to like to see God and to be still, and it helps me to kind of center my prayers.
Yeah.
So that's what I do to listen, and I don't want to ever like speak first or speak for God. I want to hear.
That's so
hear
good.
Him. So that's
Robbie Fisher last week even said that one of what he has started to do is based on what we learned last week is this idea of, Lord, what would you have your servant do? Like that just being the opening question, the opening prompt to prayer. It's not like, here are the list of things I need to cover with you, God, but what would you say to your servant? What would you say? What would you have your servant do?
Yes. Oh, that's really good. What a humbling prayer. Humbling prayer. Yeah, that's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the other ways to listen is through people. And that's one of the biggest ways God speaks to me is through other people, trusted, safe people in my life, and then through His Word. His Word is living and it's active, and read it and apply it.
I love that.
How you listen.
Well, for people who have heard this message of Ruth, have read the story, and have listened to this podcast, and they say, you know what, I'm not sure I've ever actually put my faith in God. Like I've lived this life where I kind of understand what it means. I think I would have said I believed in God, but to actually cry out to Him and to believe that He is walking with me, to believe that I'm a child of God, and to believe that He's got good things planned for me, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to have my faith in God. I'm ready now. What do they need to do to put their faith in God?
I love that, the I'm ready now, because that's it. It's a surrender, and I want to give Jesus control of my life, and that's it, and I think practically tell someone about it. Have someone walk you through that and what that looks like in your life. But I think that's where it starts. Is like, okay, God, I am ready to put my faith in you, and I'm ready to surrender. And it's this, the open-handed. That's what I think about. But I'm ready. And then talk to someone about it. Tell someone you can't do it alone. So that's
great. That's great. And I love that. And I know that you have walked that conversation with a lot of students.
Yes.
So I think it's really neat that you've seen people come to you personally and say, okay, Lindsey, I'm ready. Like, so you've been ground zero for the I'm ready conversation.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's been amazing. Because people come in from all different, and students, but all different backgrounds, all different stories, walks of life, anxieties, fears, struggles, and they're all met with the same grace, and they're all met with the same truth, is that they are loved and they're welcome, and Christ died on the cross and rose again for them, and they're in the family of God. So it's amazing to have walked through every story. There's no story that's not allowed, not welcome. So.
Well, thank you so much for being with me today. This is so great. Love it. If you guys have any questions about any of the sermons that are coming up, feel free to submit them to info@foresthill.org or put them on your campus Facebook page. We'd love to answer your questions. And I just appreciate you being with me.
Yeah,
thanks, friend.
An honor.
Join us next week. Can't wait to see you.